All right, hi, and welcome to Habits for Humans, the podcast that explores what makes people tick and how to program this brain of ours through habits. We are going to explore why we can sometimes, and in some areas of our lives, achieve extraordinary accomplishments while other times we can't get off the couch. If we want to be healthy and happy, what is the secret to programming our brain to maximize our potential? I'm your host, Becky Davidson, and today we're going to talk to my good friend, Kandy Graves. And I'm just so excited to give her some time to talk about the trauma work that she does. She works in so many modalities, and she's such an extraordinary practitioner. And we'll get to that in just a second. But I wanted to mention that we've got a giveaway at the end, and I'm going to have Kandy talk about that. And first, a word from our sponsors. This episode of Habits for Humans is brought to you by Card Salad, a company that provides done-for-you meal planning so you'll never reach for the mac and cheese again. And Lodamus, a meditation app meant to help listeners manage anxiety through hero's journey stories, whether you're struggling with an anxious mind or just want an effortless way to meditate. So, Kandy, I'm so excited to introduce you. And Kandy Graves is a pattern-breaking energy therapy practitioner who utilizes a unique balance of traditional and energy healing methods. She assists her clients to be free of depression and anxiety through owning their divinity and identifying and naming the various kinds of trauma that have affected them. And so, Kandy, I'm going to let you take it away. I would love for you to talk to our watchers and listeners about a moment that occurred several years back when you discovered one Mother's Day that you were remembering something that you had long suppressed. If you wouldn't mind just sort of unfolding that story for us, I'd love to hear that.
So, I'm asked often, why do I do the work I do? And it's because I was introduced to it with just an incredible amount of need. I was so deeply unhappy, yet on the outside, everything looked like I should be the happiest person in the world. And I definitely was not. And so my search for answers, non-medicinally, I will add, is really why I'm in the arena that I'm in. So a little bit about this storybook life I was living. I'm married with 3 little kids, 3 little boys. And like any good husband and father, with the holiday we we celebrate called Mother's Day every year, I dreaded it, and I actually hated it. And it got to the point where my husband would come to me a week or so in advance, and he would say, can you be nice this year? And, my conversation with him was, I want nothing more than to be nice. And the way I explain it is, there's a movie title. I never saw the movie, but the movie title was called Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And when I heard the title of that movie, I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly what's happening. Something inside of me was taking over. And I tried to explain this to him. And so fast forward, year after year after year, Mother's Day became just an absolute horrible day on the calendar. What I really wanted to do was just stay in bed and not get up, or get in the car and drive far, far away and just be nowhere near civilization during that day. So then I start, I'm searching, I'm on this path of healing, and I have a memory start to surface. And again, this was completely repressed on my part. I had zero recollection of this event. But as this event surfaced, I began to get answers to that invasion of the body snatchers idea. And what came to my mind and my awareness was when I was 9 years old, and my sister, just older than me, was 7 years older, so she was 16. This sister and I were instrumental in saving my mother from a suicide attempt. And this was very deliberate. And my sister was very used to taking charge and barking orders at me. And so she was yelling at me to grab my mom's feet. She had her underneath her armpits, and we carried her out the front door past my dad, who was sitting on the couch. And he turned his newspaper down to look at us and then turned it quickly back up. We went out to the car. We literally threw her in the back seat of the car. My sister, being 16, could drive. And I was 9 years old, and I got the job of being in the back seat with my mom. And her face was grossly swollen and very, very blue. And consequently, so was her tongue. She wasn't getting air. And my sister just screamed at me and said, "Help her." Well, I'm 9. I have no idea what to do, but the idea was just dropped in my brain, and I put my hand in her mouth and I pushed her tongue down and over to one side. And it worked. She began to pink up a little bit. The blue started leaving. She was able to get air. So most people then ask the question, well, let's deal with the anger that you have at your dad. And every single time that was suggested, I said, no, I have no anger at my dad. Oh, you must. And no. But what did surface for me was the truth that more than anything that day, I wanted to just go sit down by my dad and let the day play out the way it was going to, which would have meant my mother's demise. And I, as an adult, as a child, I felt an incredible amount of guilt about that. I really, truly believed in that moment that there was something wrong with me, and that I was obviously not deserving of praise because I was this terrible, horrible person. Because see, that was the deep, dark secret that I had, that I really wanted my mom to die that day. And I guess, like Paul Harvey, the rest of the story is that everything came back into my awareness about that day, including the fact that that day was a Mother's Day.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And so consequently, my passion is to help people to understand that your memories and your non-memories are dictating the outcome in your life. And this was certainly a non-memory, and trauma will find its way out, even if it's sideways. And for me, it was definitely sideways with this whole, it wasn't that I disliked being honored on Mother's Day. It was that I couldn't allow that to happen. And I had no idea why until I did, which today I have full awareness of the event. I know exactly how that day started and ended, and I have zero emotional attachment to it now. The day is completely healed for me, and I used a really powerful technique, many, but one called reparenting, where the adult me got to go and hold and love that little 9-year-old who was absolutely had every right to feel the way she did, given what she was dealing with on a daily basis with this drug-addicted mother who was incredibly unhappy and unconscious. As children, we take it on. We don't understand that it isn't about us. The adult me, though, knows that it had nothing to do with me. Everything to do with my mom and her own unresolved trauma.
Well, and so this might be a good segue into what it is you now help other people to do, which is if there is trauma wanting to surface in them and they don't know how to interpret that, or they're ready to start down that path and to figure out what it is that's informing the ways that they trigger and that their anxiety activates, or their shame or their guilt, they come to see you because I know you work in a number of different modalities. And I think modalities, you've said that they find you. So when somebody is ready to do that work, or maybe they're not even sure that they're ready, but they can't sit any longer with the anxiousness that they feel around moments where they're activating. So they know that something's going on. They don't know quite how to manage that or resolve it. When somebody comes to you, what is it that you're looking to help them accomplish?
Honestly, the short answer is love. A longer answer is just an awareness, really, of what's there. I may not have in my mind thought, oh, I want to know all about the trauma in my childhood, but I can tell you that there's no rock I haven't looked under, and I'm absolutely grateful that I have the awareness that I do. So I take people there into the awareness, and I have some very specific assignments that clients, once I'm hired, I provide for them, and it helps them to begin that awareness as well. I don't know if this is a good time to talk about the shame hit.
Please do, because I was so intrigued by the idea that we think that we don't want to feel shame, but in fact, if that's something that our brain is comfortable with, ironically, we seek it.
Yeah. So we're cooked in energy, right? Homeostasis is that innate drive to stay the same, and we're just cooked in the energy of what our parents and siblings, older siblings, are providing for us. So the shame hit is not unlike a drug addict getting a hit of a drug. It literally, we will breathe a sigh of relief because it feels like normalcy. Many of us have a poor concept of sanity because our parents did not give us good examples as children. Boundaries were not clear, punishment or praise not consistent. Our parents operated from distorted thinking that clouded reality. Their confused thinking created behavior that was or uncaring. So, and then there are several common traits of dysfunction, and I have a complete list of that. There's 14 that we've identified. But one I want to share is when we realize and understand that there are certain events in our past, I refer to them as somatic markers. So essentially, and this was when I first got into this work many, many years ago, decades ago now. We didn't call it trauma. Today, I understand it as trauma for sure. But what we called it then was, these were just events that they're somatic in nature, and they literally are electric events. And scientists through brain mapping have been able to see these along the neuropaths in our brain as little bumps, if you will, or blips. And these are marked events. So the event of my mother's suicide attempt and my sister and I subsequently saving her life was highly charged. So what happens when we come, anywhere near the anniversary of an event even, and you may not even be able to connect all these dots until, more awareness happens. But because I certainly wasn't connecting to the dot to Mother's Day. I just hated Mother's Day. And I thought, and in talking with my friends, not all of us had were excited about that day. So I just chalked it up to, it's just, I just don't like Mother's Day a whole lot more than other people don't like Mother's Day.
Right.
but it was certainly, it was this marker lighting up, if you will. So I'll have people say, oh, I don't know why, but at this particular time of year, every year, I have this, I'm just deeply saddened, or I can't get off the couch. I can't move. I have a particular client who, the smell of summer in Utah, whatever plants and weeds or whatever are blooming, that smell of summer, for years and years, triggered her. And I was able to, walk her back and help her understand why. And we dealt with it. So that, and the smell is such a strong factor in memory, and particularly in trauma.
Well, and so if somebody's ready to undertake this work,
mm-hmm.
and they're reaching out to you, I mean, what do you start with? Are you helping them excavate? They're looking for those events that actually created the somatic markers in the first place?
You broke up just a little bit there. Sorry about that. But
yeah, let me jump back in. I was just wondering if go ahead.
Well, we don't try to create that. They're just, those events are there, and if there's any trauma at all in them, they're electrically and magnetically charged. Mm-hmm. And talk about going back to family of origin and the energy we're cooked in, and those, and homeostasis, where we want to stay the same. These events along those neuropaths in the brain, think of the neuropath as like a freeway exit off of the freeway, right? We can, where you live, and what exit you take. You can almost find yourself at home unconsciously because you've done it so many times. And that's very similar to what's happening. And if there is trauma along that neuropath, that magnetic and electric expression of those traumatic events literally tend to pull us back into that same line of thinking. What we do in the work that I'm engaged in is we literally just exit. We just build a new freeway exit, a new neuropath, a different way to think about it, a different way to respond to it, to act to it. And what we're doing is we're taking those events, like my mother's suicide attempt, and we're neutralizing them. When it finally surfaced fully for me, it was at least 10 to 15 sessions before the entire thing was neutralized. The last 2 sessions I did for myself. And I had a really profound experience. That's a long time. I mean, it's wonderful that it's wonderful that it works at all. But today, with a really powerful technique known as the epigenetic technique, I can assist people to neutralize trauma up to and including PTSD in a matter of seconds. And I can do that even content free. And what that means is you don't have to relive the trauma out loud, telling me exactly what happened, and I don't get secondary PTSD from hearing what happened to you. Sometimes events just need to be talked about. We do need to use that truth center, the blue throat chakra. It actually will benefit from speaking the words out loud. But I can tell you I've seen remarkable, almost miraculous results from using the epigenetic technique. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask you, I mean, now that we know that neuroplasticity, for example, is a permanent feature of the brain, it must be gratifying to you that all along you've been doing this work, but now there's evidence that, well, you're essentially creating new neural circuitry in the brain.
Yeah. So I'd like to share an example of EGT and how profound it has been. So up to date, EGT, so I've been doing this work over 20 years. And I say this work, and, you refer to, people we now know these things, right? We know about neuroplasticity. We know about various things that are happening in the brain. Well, 25 years ago, I would have left brain thinkers come in and say, well, tell me why this works or how it works, and let me read something. And I had nothing to provide. I said, no, you just have to come in and experience it, right? Today, it's very different. I could point you to a lot of things to read. So a really profound experience I've been trained in this technique called EGT for about 8 years now. And over the last 8 years, I've actually worked with 3 sets of parents who found their child after suicide. And one of the things that was really, really important to me was to be able to help them to rid themselves of the visual. And I'll just use the last example, a friend of mine. She and her husband were instrumental in cutting their son down from hanging. And I asked them both initially, let me know when you're ready to be done with the visual, because I know you have one.
And when you say visual, just to be clear, Kandy, you mean the memory that replays and replays and loops in the brain for the person who witnessed that event that was so traumatic?
Absolutely. Yeah. Obsessively so. Right. And we don't want to see it anymore. And so neither one of this couple said initially that they wanted to be done with it. They said no. And this was just days after the event. And they said, no, it's a connection for us. We're not ready. 3 months down the road, however, the mom called me and said, okay, I'm ready. And she came in, and the experience that I've had all 3 times with these parents is the very same thing. Using the technique, ultimately, this visual that's like right here in front of their face ends up as a speck or a dot on the horizon.
Wow.
And then I always retest and, tell them to try as hard as they can to bring the visual back up. And I've checked in with all of them even after the fact, months after this session, and it's still a speck on the horizon. And that just means they get to focus on all the beautiful memories they had with their child.
Well, I'm imagining too that all that energy, mental, emotional, energetic, that was going into, even if it was involuntary, but if that energy was going into preserving that memory intact, now it is released back to that person, and they're no longer a hostage to the memory and the sort of energetic charge that it carried. Is that right?
Yeah, and absolutely. And think about a computer. Sometimes we have to clean it up a little bit, right? We have to remove things that we don't need anymore, that isn't wanted, and it's clouding up the memory, and we're unable to add new things to the hard drive of the computer, and it's very similar.
Well, and so people, once they've experienced this, what then? Is it ever difficult for people to sort of re-engage with their life now that they're no longer identified through that trauma? And how do they do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've never had anybody say, gee, I gave up all that trauma and drama, and I don't know how to live. That's never come back to me. What comes back consistently is, oh my goodness, what a gift I've been given. And about 10 years ago, I began to train people to do what I do. So I do have an apprenticeship because I find that the people that have benefited the most from the work that I do are incredible candidates in being able to provide it for people they love as well. Um, it's a year-long deep dive, but they get to work on their own stuff, and then ultimately they're able to, assist others.
Now, I know there aren't too many of you who do this work. I mean, maybe just 120 something. Was that the number? With as few of you as there are providing this extraordinary therapeutic technique, I think it's a bonus that, as you say, people can learn eventually to do this for themselves, or as you suggest, to help a loved one undertake to do this as well.
Yes, absolutely. The epigenetic technique utilizes the meridians, which is, anciently the Chinese has mapped that out for us. Not unlike going to an acupuncturist or an acupressurist, where, they touch or put needles along the meridian lines in the body. I know when I first started this work, I came from a very Western mindset. And so this idea of meridians and chakras and all this energy talk for me was a little voodoo, or maybe a lot voodoo initially. But I can tell you, just over the years and years of watching people walk out of my office and just, they're just different, and they have a different experience in life, it's proof to me. Well, and my own, right? First and foremost, my own. There is one little thing I wanted to share, and it's a personal experience that I had. And this was before I started any work at all, and even before the Mother's Day event. We lived in this home, and I was making dinner, and I had 3 little boys who were probably around age, I don't know, they were like maybe 7, 9, and 11. And they were upstairs, and I was down in the kitchen getting dinner ready, and it was so quiet and it was so peaceful. And I'd hear a giggle every once in a while from them, and this speaks to homeostasis. I grew up with a drug addict mother, and my dad was a classic enabler, and my normal was chaos. And so I remember what happened that day is I walked up the stairs. I don't necessarily remember that or even what I said and did, but what I do remember was walking back down the stairs, and all 3 of my boys were crying, and I had a sense of satisfaction, and I was okay with that until I actually had a mirror on my landing of my staircase, and I caught my own glimpse in the mirror, and it was in that second I came to, essentially. I woke up. I became conscious of what I had just done. And I had this awareness of total and thorough disgust with myself. And I thought, I can't believe I just stirred this up. Everything was so peaceful, so quiet, so wonderful. They were getting along. And I unconsciously made myself, got myself up the stairs, did whatever I did to stir it up, and then came back down the stairs. Had I not made contact with myself in the mirror, I would have likely continued that pattern. But I'll tell you that day, that ended. I became aware that I was capable of that, and it was the very last time that I did it. And that in and of itself was really, really remarkable. But one of the ways to assist someone through trauma is to make eye contact with them, have them stay present with you through eye contact. And it was just a huge, huge, and very pivotal moment for me. I had a lot of pain that continued after that for various other reasons. But I wasn't stirring up the pot anymore. I wasn't creating the chaos.
Well, no, I just think it's so interesting that it was you catching a glimpse of yourself, seeing your reflection in the mirror, that somehow broke the spell a little bit, if we could describe it that way. And you suddenly had a realization that you had, without meaning to and not consciously, created chaos where there was none, because chaos was what your brain knew and was comfortable with.
Yep, it was my homeostasis. Yes.
Right. No, I think that's actually such an important point as a takeaway for people who might be listening to this, that just because you're comfortable with something being a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that you're thriving. It means that you're doing what's familiar.
Yes.
But to have that sudden awareness where it's as if a deeper consciousness or a more awake consciousness was watching you catch that glimpse of yourself in the mirror. And it sounds like that was the beginning of the waking up for you.
For sure. And one thing I want you just said my favorite word, and the word is familiar. And I want you to think about that word. There are two words contained in the word familiar: family and liar. And if it's familiar to you, then it is the family generational pattern, essentially the lie that we're engaged in. So what I love to tell people is, if you believe that you are anything less than pure magnificence, then you believe the lie. And we all have been cooked in the energy of some sort of a lie, right? And the lie is, obviously, parents are not getting up in the morning, and this is something I share all the time too, rubbing their hands together and saying, gee, how can we screw up the kids today? Even my own drug-addicted mother never, ever did that. I think if she was awake and aware of what she did, she would be absolutely disgusted. So we don't do it consciously. We're just literally in the subconscious. It's already programmed by age 7, and so we're just playing it out. Mm-hmm. And we're really truly doing the best that we know how. Even I know it's hard to believe, but even the worst, abuse and neglect it comes from an unconscious, subconscious place. And it's the truth of who you and I are, all of us, is just pure love. And there's no need for wholeness, because we are the personification of that. And it's just coming back to that, waking up, getting rid of the familiarity, getting rid of the family lie, the generational patterns.
And one of the things I love about the work you do is, I think some people have that awareness. They know there's a glitch in the programming, or as you call it, a somatic marker. They wouldn't use those words perhaps, but they know that something is activating their anxiety or their shame or their guilt, and maybe they're even seeking that hit. What I love though is, maybe they don't have to go through decades of treatment. Or I'm thinking of a beloved parent, one of my parents, who was in therapy for decades, and I'm not sure that it really served him. So for people to get results that are so definitive and dramatic, and to be able to do so essentially quickly enough that they kind of work you out of your job, you're empowering people to go on and just begin to live their lives without having to stay tethered to a therapy or a therapist, forever, because that happens sometimes, and it's discouraging.
Oh, yeah. No, I like to say that just like a good parent works themselves out of a job, so does a good energy therapy practitioner, which is me.
I love that. I love that. And I have one kind of final question that I wanted to ask you about. There's so much talk about affirmations, and if you think you can be something or do something, then you can. But I think the work that you do helps people really make that deep connection in the subconscious to that primordial goodness or magnificence that you have mentioned. I feel like I've touched into it many times during meditation, but I feel like sometimes people want to have that alternative message. They're trying to grab onto that, and they just can't, because something in their subconscious doesn't yet believe it.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, as we kind of land this plane, if you could speak to that. There is something powerful about affirmations, but it needs to be done in such a way that we can actually reprogram the subconscious, which again is your work. That's what you do.
Yeah, you've done a good job with your homework. because it's important to talk about this. So understanding that homeostasis, again, the definition, the innate drive to stay the same. And don't get me wrong, I love affirmations. They're powerful, but I like them for a very different reason than most people do. And that's because I use them to smoke out what's actually written on the subconscious. Because you'll find most people, let's say, one of the biggest things is setting New Year's resolutions, right? And we're dang lucky if we're still, on board in February. Like you get a gold star if you've made it into March, right? And the reason for that is that you just can't say it enough if it's not what you actually have been programmed with. So, for example, I created a 5-step process to help reprogram the subconscious using positive affirmations. But it's as the smoke out tool, right? And one of the things I tell my clients from the very beginning is they have to begin thinking about what they're thinking about. They need to be the observer of their own thoughts. And as I began to do this, there was a thought that kept surfacing. And the thought was, "You're so ugly."
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. And then as time went on, and I was obviously more and more aware of my thoughts, that thought happened a lot. And through the work that I do, I was able to go back to a time and a place. I was 7 years old. I was standing at the bathroom counter with my mom. And my mom was my elementary school secretary. And she was a very high functioning addict. She actually retired after 25 years of service to that school. And as we stood at the bathroom mirror together, I was just in there to comb my hair, brush my teeth, and get the heck away from her. And but that's where that thought began. And the little 7-year-old did not understand that what the adult saw, and that is that mom was talking to herself. She wasn't talking to me. But as children, we can't even fathom that these caregivers would be lying to us or be saying those kinds of things about themselves. We're little sponges and just waiting to hear what we should think about ourselves. And essentially that's what happened. And so through this process, this 5-step process I created, my thoughts of "you're so ugly" changed to "I am a beautiful daughter of a loving and powerful God." And that was my replacement. And I used a very powerful technique known as the transitory statement, because you have to trick the RAS, the reticular activating system in the brain. You have to trick it because it stands as sentinels to that homeostasis, and it literally will not let anything pass that filter that doesn't match. So I'm a beautiful daughter of a loving and powerful God isn't you're so ugly. But using that powerful technique, I was able to make that distinction. And I can't even tell you the last time I had to think either one of those things. I literally just am a beautiful daughter of a loving and powerful God. And it's just part of who I am.
Well, and so first of all, how beautiful that you were able to restore yourself in that way. And then of course, how miraculous that with a technique, I think you called it the transitory technique, is that right? Transitory statements. Tell me again what the name of the technique is.
Well, that was a combination of transitory statement, reparenting, and then I just put it in a 5-step process that actually helps you to learn to listen to and actually hear what you're programmed with.
Oh, that's just so powerful. I think we're all a hostage to messages that are lies, to messages that have us living sometimes far below what we want to be capable of, messages that maybe have helped us survive in the past and we're adaptive but are not helping us any longer. And so being able to go from the old message to the new one by way of a technique that helps you bypass, as you say, the RAS, the reticular activating system. It's as if the brain, like you say, homeostasis, it wants to keep you right where it is comfortable. And so if you really want to move beyond that, you do have to get clever, don't you?
Yeah. Anthony Robbins, Tony Robbins is the person that put this particular technique on the map, which is known as NLP or neuro-linguistic programming.
Okay.
And it is definitely a technique I use, and it's very, very powerful as well.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you so much for chatting with us today. And I hope people can find you because I feel like the work you're doing, honestly, is so crucial. I think a lot of people are deeply unhappy, but they don't know how to free themselves. And I love that all of these modalities that you use and that you're so nimble with help people to sort of, unlock the prison door on their own, if you will, and kind of step on out into a brighter, more version of themselves, one where they can play in the possibility space rather than be stuck back in homeostasis. So anyway, again,
Sure.
Thank you for chatting with us. Before we finish up here, can you tell people where they can find you online?
Yeah, so you can go to my website is asyouThinkYouAre.com, and that's just all written out, asyouThinkYouAre.com. You can email me directly if you want to at coachkandy@gmail.com. And my mother blessed me with a strange name spelling, so it's Candy with a K.
I'm pretty sure I wish that I was named that when I was a child. I love your name. I've always loved that name. So
well, that's okay, because I hated it for a long time and then finally made peace with it.
So asyouThinkYouAre.com, and then people can actually email you if they like. And again, it's coachkandy@gmail.com. Was that right?
Yep.
Wonderful.
And I think there's a link membership site. Did you hear that? Did you hear that part?
I did the second time. I think we've had a little bit of an unstable internet connection today. So, but I did want to visit our giveaways today. As you know, we all want to eat right, but it takes so long to meal plan. And our listeners can get 7 days of meal planning free and cook something healthy tonight when they sign up for the 7-day challenge. The link to that will be in the show notes. And then Candy, I believe you've got something that you wanted to talk to people about. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so on the website, you can go to, if you just go to the very first page on the website, at the very top, you can access a tiny offer, it's called, and it's done for you, basically, start to finish process known as mirrors. And so that's something you can access as well. And I don't have the free code yet, but I will definitely give that to your listeners.
Wonderful. And so they could look for that in the show notes.
Have that ready.
Okay. Yeah. Terrific.
Yes.
All right. Well, again, it's been such a delight to talk with you. I have just no end of admiration for the work you do. I've worked with you personally, and I know how powerful not just the modalities are, but your way of maneuvering people through these techniques that in fact are not just sort of life-giving, but life-saving. So just wish you all the best in your continued work and hope you continue to thrive. I know you will. So,
thank you so much.
All right. So, and again, for the listeners, thanks for joining us today. Remember to check our show notes and get all of your gifts. And thank you in advance for giving us a positive review. We wish you a wonderful day.